There's no doubt that Facebook is becoming a key platform for public figures and a major political tool. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz sat down with top Israeli academic expert on the Arab world, Dr. Jonathan Spyer, who recently experienced it on a more personal level after being removed from the network. Now he's back on Facebook and he's positive these actions are politically motivated.
Dr. Jonathan Spyer, you're known as a leading Israeli intellectual. You're connected with a major Israeli university. You have articles published all the time. Well-known guy. And Facebook took you down.
Yeah, well, that's right. It was a very strange experience. I received, it's about a month ago now, out of the blue, a sudden message saying that my Facebook account had been disabled. I then looked into the mechanisms available to Facebook users to ask what had happened. They don't tell you automatically what had happened. And I wrote to the email address provided, and I was then told that my Facebook page had been permanently disabled. That's when you're not supposed to be able to do anything about it any further, because of support for violence and for violent organizations. And I then wrote a very angry letter saying, well, the only organization I've ever supported which could remotely be described as violent are the legally constituted armed forces of the state of which I am a citizen, namely Israel, and possibly also some Kurdish groups in Iraq and Syria supported by the West and the United States. So I didn't quite get it. They didn't respond beyond that, and it took then a considerable campaign, public campaign of a number of friends of mine, organized by a number of friends of mine, eventually to get my Facebook page reinstated. But yeah, it was a very, very strange experience, and especially to learn to get that sense of the extent to which Facebook is now a monopoly. And if you lose your Facebook access, you really do lose access to a massive platform for for discussion, and also to a massive network of contacts. I lost all those. Thankfully, they've now been reinstated.
Did they ever go into any more detail about what it was that you were accused of that forced them to take? I mean, they allow viciously anti-Semitic groups.
Yeah,
they
absolutely.
allow have access or affiliated.
Well, absolutely. I was just recently reading on Facebook this morning, a friend of mine put up a thing saying that as a result of a sort of experiment on this, it's been discovered that the phrase "kill all Jews" is not apparently regarded by Facebook as a violation of their community standards, as they call them. So it's very strange double standard indeed operating. No, I was never told in any detail, and it's part of the strangeness of the experience, I think, as well, that you as a Facebook user, we as Facebook users, are not told the reasons for for what's happened. Now, if you're someone like me that has a bunch of great people who wanted to help me, that eventually put pressure on them and it worked out. But if you weren't that, if you were just an ordinary user, you're in this very weak position where you're like, well, please tell me what I've done so I can at least defend myself or explain. And there's Facebook's response is, well, we're not going to tell you. We've just decided, and that's the end of that.
The head of Facebook is Mark Zuckerberg, who is Jewish, who has met with Israeli leaders, certainly not a supporter that we know of BDS or anything else anti-Israel. He watches our broadcast every day. What is your message to him?
Well, I think that there needs to be a clearer, more transparent policy with regard to protecting users and community standards. There needs to be, a known gauge by which people can be aware, of what sort of behavior is considered acceptable and unacceptable. And I think there also needs to be a change in the process whereby when a decision is taken to remove somebody, whereby that person, needs to be told why it's happened clearly, and perhaps given a real chance, to defend themselves before the decision to permanently delete the profile is taken.
Do you think that Israel, generally speaking, is making the best use of Facebook? I mean, in terms of getting its message across to people, or are we accessing Facebook as we should be?
Well, I think there's been a great deal of improvement in recent years. I mean, I think if we look back over the last decade, as social media itself has proliferated and advanced, and we look at the various conflicts Israel's been involved in, in the Second Lebanon War, Israeli communication strategy on social media was more or less non-existent. And by Cast-led in 2008-2009, it had improved. And I think since then, with every operation, we've seen a considerable improvement in terms of the time it's taken for Israeli organizations to respond. And I think also, importantly, the proliferation of pro-Israel NGOs, not just relying on the kind of big, cumbersome organizations of state, but rather doing kind of what the other side does, which is like building up a network of NGOs, of genuine, energetic activists who are up there on Facebook and Twitter, ready to respond in real time. So yeah, I think there's still a long way to go, of course, and there's always room for improvement, but I think there has been considerable improvement in recent years.
Dr. Jonathan Spyer, thanks so much for being with us at ILT.